qualify myself real quickly. I celebrated a birthday in December of 2013. It's December 27th, 2013, so I just celebrated 4 years. I got sober quite young. I was 19, just turned 20 in February. So I'm 24 now. I have a sponsor who knows they're my sponsor. We meet every 2 weeks because we're both very busy people. I am taking women through the steps, and I have taken women through the steps. And I have 2 home groups that I regularly attend. One of them is Monday Night Young People's in Oakland, and the other is College Bay in Berkeley. Those are the 2 meetings that I've been going to since I got sober. And College Bay was actually the first meeting I ever attended when I was 14. So there's still very much large portions in my life, and they're still really, really important to me. And I'm there every week. Yeah, so I'll start a little bit with what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I grew up in Oakland, and my family was pretty chaotic from the beginning. Didn't really ever have like a solid like foundation, and like moved around in schools a lot. My home life was also really chaotic. They were both drinkers and fought a lot, so there was a lot of violence and like turmoil and chaos and anger, and those were pretty much, that was like my foundation, was like how to express yourself with anger, and express it with, you know, a lot of like passion and a lot of like not nice things to say. Coupled with like being bullied at school, like not really having like a safe place to go, and then like coming home and like also like not really having like another safe place. That was just sort of like the, you know, the cards that I was dealt with, and that's fine. And it's made me who I am today. I'm very much proud of, like, you know, I'm not ashamed of it at all. It's you know, it allows me to share my experience with others. So I'm very grateful to have grown up the way that I did, though it was like quite chaotic and like, you know, not necessarily something that I would want like my children to go through if I ever decide to have any. But what it also did was it allowed me to, like, I had to grow up a lot faster than I wanted to, and it's made me really independent. And we sort of have this like survival mode already of like, you know, we have to drink by ourselves, and like, you know, we're not really like, we don't work well with others, right? So like that, with like, you know, just already having to deal with like always being, you know, relying on myself, like not relying on others. It was just got really lonely pretty fast. And like, you know, I just always felt, we talk about it in the book, like we always felt different. We always felt unique. That was, you know, what growing up was like. So when I took my first drink, because it wasn't a drink, but it was something similar to that. I felt different, but I felt different. Like, I felt important, you know, I felt like I was someone who, you know, had something to say. I felt like what I was going through, and it was, you know, I justified it too. I was like, oh, I definitely have a reason to like use, you know, and drink. And, you know, I've been through a lot. So like, it's fine. Like, this is what I should be doing. And it made me feel unique too. It made me feel special, which is something that I never really felt like before. Was I didn't really feel special, and I didn't really feel different. I felt different. Like, I felt like people were looking at me all the time, and I felt like, you know, just weird, like a weird person. But this time I felt totally justified in whatever I did. And that included what I was, you know, what I decided to put in my body to make me feel different. So, you know, that continued for quite some time. And I did it, and I went hard, because obviously I came in here, like, it was only like 7 years. Right. So yeah, when I came in, I had acquired some like mental health issues, and I dropped out of high school, and I ended up finishing, but because I already had this track record of like not being good enough and like failing out of school, when I went to college, I also dropped out. I went to California College of the Arts for photography, and like halfway through, I just dropped out because school and responsibilities was just not a priority for me. My priority was to get loaded. That's what made me feel better, because I didn't feel good about myself from the start. So that's what I wanted to continue to do, and it didn't. It didn't last very long, because shortly after I dropped out, I was, starting to notice that like, oh, this is something that you've wanted to do for the rest of your life, and now you don't want to. You want to get high instead. And that's not like that's not what you're supposed to be doing. Like, that's not what you intended for yourself, was to get high. You wanted much more than that. And the fact that I was sort of taking that as I was putting it on the, on the back seat was something that I did register in my mind. But it for me, it wasn't enough to like stop. So I wanted that. I wanted I had every intention of starting to like stop. It just took some time. And I actually have a journal of like the year that I tried to get sober, and I had actually tried to get sober a couple of times and I forgot. It's when you have some time, it's like, it's definitely harder to remember like what it was like, and the struggles of like really like trying to stop and wanting to, and just not really like getting desperate enough and have the willingness. It's hard. So I believe I tried in like November of 2013. And I think I tried for like a month and was just like detoxing on my own. And it was really tough. I remember feeling like so empty, and I remember like not really having anything to identify with, because I had put everything into drugs and alcohol. And then when I dropped out, it was like, well, what do I have left? That was like pretty much it, was just me doing art. And when I didn't make that a priority anymore, it really hurt to like, well, like who am I now? Like my identity is pretty much attached to drugs and alcohol. So that was my identity. And when I didn't have that, it's like, well, what am I now? So I didn't really have anything to go off of. And I think that was just really hard for me. So the last time I drank was actually, I went to go see The Wolf of Wall Street when it came out, which is like not a good movie to go watch when you're like trying to stop drinking. And I had a friend who like didn't even know that I was trying to stop, and he like offered me beer, and of course I said yes, and I didn't even get, I didn't do anything. Like, it wasn't working, but I did it because that's the only way I know how. And so that pretty much, when it didn't work for the last time and I was like done and tired, I pretty much decided that I was serious. And I asked my stepdad to take me to a meeting, and he had about 2 years at the time. And it was like super weird. I got like a 24-hour chip, and like awkward, and it was a mess, but it was enough to like keep me coming back. Because I did go to a meeting once when I was like 14. So I always knew like I would be back. So I started to go again, and I was very skeptical. I had a friend who sort of shoved me around and said like, yeah, I'll give you a ride home if you come fellowship with us. And he sort of had pushed me into doing the steps, and I was really skeptical. And he said, well, if you do the steps, and if you do all of them and they don't work, I will buy you a drink. And I was like, okay, like that's good enough for me. So I worked the steps, I got a sponsor, and I started to notice pretty much what happened for me was like I did 1, 2, and 3. He asked me, if I was willing to do any of the stuff, and I just said sure. Like I don't know what it means, but yes, I'm much more than willing to do it. I didn't have any other options, right? When I did my 4-step, that's what pretty much what changed for me was like, yes, I'm justified, and whatever. I see, wrong with other people, but like the important part was like I had a part in everything that I did. And I never saw that before. And when someone else who had like gone through what I had gone through and felt the pain that I did was pointing it out to me, that's when I realized that I was like, oh, I should probably listen to this woman. And since she seems to know what she's doing and like has some time and she wants what I have. And she was right, obviously. Like I had a part in everything. We all do. And that's what pretty much kept me coming back was doing my fourth and fifth step. And I did it honestly. And I put everything down because I was done. So pretty much my first year was getting my foundation, going to meetings, working my steps, like just sort of getting the footwork down to like build that foundation for myself. And met a lot of people, met friends, just started to build relationships with people. My second year was sort of a mess because like I was starting to meet a lot of people and, I meet boys, and boys are always fun in AA, especially in young people's. And that was something that, I used just like drugs and alcohol, right? And I talk about that because it was really important in my sobriety. I ended up having to do, not just when I did my fourth step again, I had to do a sexual inventory as opposed to, the regular, but I had to do like a larger one. And that was because I felt, because I was using it like drugs and alcohol, right? It put me in a position where I don't know if I was necessarily like wanting to drink, but I didn't feel very good about myself because when I came in, I had no self-worth and I had no self-esteem. And what happens when you take the drugs and alcohol away is I start to use other things. And it put me in a position where I was very unhappy and I was wondering why. And, when I talk to my sponsor and I call her, she asks, do you want relief or do you want freedom? And I hate that because it's, it's like, well, do you want to do the work or do you just want to sit in your shit? So I did a lot of that my second year and I did the work. And after we finished that, like, we would sort of sit down and she would just ask me like, well, what kind of person do you want to be? What does like sober Alex look like? What does Alex look like in like 2 years? Like basically like, what do you want in yourself? What do you see yourself doing? What are the things that are going to keep you going? And she basically did this so that I could like, build myself as a person, like in AA, because when you come in young, you don't really have like an identity. And it's important to like build yourself up as an adult. Because I wasn't given those like life skills as I talked about before. I didn't learn how to like do my taxes or like I didn't learn how to like talk to people even, just basic like life things that I really missed out on. And my sponsor pretty much showed me how to do all those things. So my third year was it's like, I know it's supposed to, like we say like it gets easier, but like my third year was really, really rough. It definitely challenged me a lot of like my feelings come back, after I stopped drinking, within like that first year of sobriety. But I feel like in my third year, they came back like full force. And I was like, they say like, what do they say? They say like, God doesn't give you enough that he feels like you can't handle. I feel like that's not true. I feel like God gives you more than you can handle so that you can sort of like flail and like drown and learn from it. But I definitely don't feel like he gives you more than you can handle, because that was too much. I was on a host committee at the time for EBYPAA, which is All California Young People's in AA. And at the same time, I was going through like a really toxic relationship breakup sort of thing. And then right after that, I found out my biological father had died. And I'm laughing because it's when you say it like at once, it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff for one person to handle. And I know that I can come to these rooms and say something like that, but I also say that to show that like we can do these things sober. And it's super important to hear that from someone else, because you hear it all the time, and then when it happens to you, it's just like tunnel vision, and you just can't, you don't, it feels like there's no way out. I'm actually getting sort of emotional. But it's just good to know that there is sort of a light and there is hope, and that we can always do these things with the help of like our fellowship and a connection with a higher power and with a sponsor. That's at least been my experience. So that was sort of year 3 for me. It was a lot of like a lot of not being able to use those vices. I like quit caffeine, kind of quit. I wasn't drinking as much coffee, and then I wasn't really like eating sugar, and then I wasn't dating, and so I wasn't really using anything. I was just sort of sit with my feelings and be uncomfortable. And it's really, really nice to know what I'm like as a person, because I was able to do those things and I was able to do them sober. It's also extremely rewarding when you're not just constantly putting things in your body for validation or using someone or using something. And it just feels good to know that these things are all possible. So that being said, and I've sort of just struggled like on and off with like, being super on fire about AA and not wanting to go and just wanting to die. And there were times where I didn't really know why I was still going. And I wasn't. There were times where I just wasn't going. And what sort of brought me back was just people in my life, or like, I had to show up for a commitment to something. I promised somebody I would be there. I think the most important part for me about wanting to still show up though was the fact that I didn't want to drink, right? I just didn't feel very good about myself, but I was like, I absolutely do not want to drink. I don't want to go back to the way that things were, and I don't want to go back to those feelings, because these feel a lot better than how they did before, just not like an empty shell of a person. So yeah, that being said, like what my life is like today is like very busy. I went back to school last semester, and that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in sobriety, honestly. Because those fears of like not being good enough and failing start to come back. And it was really, really challenging for me to like feel like I was going to fail, because my relationship with my higher power is not good today. That's why those fears come back, is because I have a fear that I'm not going to get taken care of. I have a fear that God won't take care of me. So I'm starting to run out of time, but basically, yeah, I have a very busy life, and I complain about it a lot. But when I think about it, like, I honestly, this is what I love doing, is I love meeting with women, and I love sharing at meetings, and I love going to meetings. And today, I get to do those things, right? Like I woke up, I went to work right afterward. I met with a sponsee. I'm doing this. I'm meeting with another sponsee right after. And then I'm meeting with another woman who's quite new, but she's just a very good friend of mine. And I'm like super, super, like, I'd love if I could like talk about how much I love AA in this meeting, like I would. It's absolutely done, great things. And, when I think about it, like I want to cry, because it's just so beautiful, like the way that it changes people and the way that it's changed my life. So thank you for listening to me and being here today and being sober. Like, you guys you know, for the people who are new, especially, like, if it feels like it's a lot, like, you at least have today to be sober. So yeah, I'm just excited to hear from all of you guys. So thanks.